one day somebody telephoned me and saying, Ramurthy, I have decided I must take offbeat track and move away from this rut of commercial banking. I am thinking of setting up a microfinance, non-banking financial institution to help the poor.
I mean, to be frank, one didn't know if it will succeed because with my background in the regulatory side, I said there are many hurdles.
So I was not confident on that. He was very committed and he said, no, Ramurthy, poor are viable and they are bankable. And unfortunately, what is happening is the sector is managed now by not necessarily competent professionals. If professionals like you, me, set up a bank and manage it effectively well, financial sustainability need not be in doubt at all as long as it is well governed.
We formed a small company and Mr. Ramamurthy and he had signed the basic documents.
Having been the signatory to the memorandum, which is the charter of birth of this organization, one of the signatories is me and maybe the second signatory was Samit. So that's one of the proudest moments of that, looking back. What really bound us full of all of us is same ethos, same strong personal integrity.
Then only the snowball effect that one success leads to another.
Both Sunil and Mr. Ramurthy kept us on the straight road, and they are responsible to a large extent to the incredible reputation which Ujjivan enjoys today.
I reviewed the memorandum and articles of association when they were first drafted. I was also an investor when Smith and I invested some of our personal funds in the angel round, friends and family round, as did many people and made out like bandits. Went to the first branch opening. I think we had some interesting conversations about raising professional capital apart from the seed capital raised from so-called friends and families. So I believe that my expectations were more than fulfilled.
In some sense, the Caspian and the Bellwether and Ujjivan's kind of history and stories feels like we've done it together for the last 2 decades. And today when we talk of microfinance, we really talk a lot about urban microfinance. And I think Ujjivan kind of really set the stage and standard for others to follow. I think that passion, I think, unified all of us, as board members, as shareholders.
I had the pleasure and privilege to be a part of the first board at Ujjivan. Michael Dell felt a natural affinity, not just with Samit and the Ujjivan team, but with Ujjivan clients and their hopes and ambitions and their vision for their business's future. And it was really that investment in people that the leadership team made from the very beginning and throughout that served Ujjivan so well in difficult times as well as good.
You get to meet people like Shamit and you interact with them and you plot a certain change you want to see in the world. But the idea was a few select organizations. So it was highly curated and calibrated as to who we would work with. So I really pushed through saying that if we don't back him, there's nobody you're really going to back as far as an Indian context is concerned. There's a belief in him that he can execute to this. One of the more interesting leadership calls that he took very early, which I have not heard many organizations actually take, was the fundamental belief that the different parts of the country are different. And so let's have COOs, if you will, for each of the regions of the north, south, east, west. Now, which meant 4 COOs for the organization. I can't think of many organizations which have taken that kind of call because it's an unusual construct of decentralization while maintaining a centralized structure. So that's kind of a call that he took.
In 2008, a lot of our investors felt at some stage we would have to move to doing an IPO, right? So we needed to get in a hardcore private equity investors, and so we were very nervous.
So at that time, Sequoia, which is one of the most premier venture capital, so I got a meeting for Shamit with him, and he loved the idea. And they, I think, were the first serious big funders.
Shamit was a hard nut to crack initially. He almost didn't want to talk to me and didn't quite understand how to handle us at Sequoia and now Peak 15. Just like you very carefully select a co-founder that you want to build your company with, knowing fully well there'll be ups and downs, more downs than ups in the early years. In a similar manner, we think of ourselves as a early stage investor, like a founding investor, where we want to go through that journey of ups and downs. Ujjivan was the company that taught me that you can run a financially strong company, but you can also give back at the same time. And oh, by the way, if you do it right, they actually complement each other really well. By running a very tight financial shop, we would generate profits and we would be able to run something called Parinam on the side. And that would be able to give back more and more as we scaled. And so it became this beautiful viral infinity loop that the better that Ujjivan did, the better Parinam did, and that then gave back to Ujjivan and so on and so forth. It's one of those relationships. I'm no longer an investor. I'm no longer a shareholder in Ujjivan. But the beauty of this business is the relationships that you make when there's a, Andhra crisis that you have to go through together, or when the next round of funding doesn't look like it's happening, but then we as Sequoia and others came together to help the company through tough financing times.
And it is amazing that despite all our apprehensions, our relationship with Sequoia and especially with Mohit was incredible. Also the fact that we had Parinam, that changed Mohit himself, and he then took a lot of these learnings and took it back to the private equity world.
My association with Ujjivan has been a very exciting journey to begin with, because when I first went to meet with Shamit and Ujjivan, I was put on an auto rickshaw, taken around to meet with the customers. Being one of the young and exciting MFIs in the country, at least they would arrange me a car, but that actually showed a lot of the character with which Ujjivan was starting to get built. Because in other companies, I have to establish myself before they accord that kind of respect. And in Ujjivan, they treated everybody in the same way. I actually felt like it was my company, and that is how I contributed. You see, most of the other MFIs that we have been part of, that we see in the industry, it is all about only making money. Money, in my view, is a consequence. If you build a great institution with a good business and good people around, money will come. Ujjivan, right from the beginning, it was all about how can I build a good institution with good set of people, how I can treat them actually better, how I can treat my consumers better, and how to be transparent with my shareholders.
If you go back to the growth and history of microfinance in India, most people used to call them members. Okay, Ujjivan was the first, or maybe the first, to call them customers. So you give them that respect that she is your customer, okay, and therefore I need to provide that level of service, because financial capital, I think, really translates into confidence. Okay, and when you see that capital yielding better results for you, and you dream bigger for yourself and your families, I do believe we've been a small part of catalyzing better lives in that sense. Ujjivan has consistently, been a great place to work for many years. Even in the years that we were growing, and perhaps, when we were not as financially successful as we are today, budgets around developing people and training people were never cut. Shamit being fairly clear that what Ujjivan needed to be was not the number one NBFC MFI in those days, but more the best.
So, first of all, the journey with Ujjivan was to see the promise of investing with a gender lens. And Ujjivan opened its doors to women's well-being to do that type of work. The family's first priority is the next generation, right? The kids. We want the kids to be in school. We want the kids to do better. Of course, everybody feels like that, regardless of what income bracket you're coming from. And Shamit and the organization leveraged a lot of the new technologies, early adoption of things like document management systems going online, giving loan officers in-field devices rather than pencil and paper. And so Ujjivan became the leader in turnaround time. The time it took from application to disbursement from something like 3 weeks to 4 days.
India has so much work that requires to be done. India has so much, therefore, opportunity from the business standpoint, in the way the approach to business, the policies, the product design, the delivery was done from the start, having an empathy for customers in the way that I had not seen in a lot of places. And Ujjivan not only met our initial expectations and objectives and milestones that we had set, but far exceeded it, because It was such a successful operation that it went pan-India, so it went into geographies that several other MFIs had not achieved.
The time I had joined, in fact, it was a global financial crisis. The very first thing that you see in this organization is a culture of trust. There's a lot of, personal interaction and a bonding which is coming out of that one single goal of doing well and bringing up this organization. Now, how do you measure this? It can only be felt. You can't measure it, right? And at that time, we had some excellent investors. There were the likes of Sequoia, Lok Capital, Unitas, Caspian, who would be very amicable, but who would put the point gently and firmly. Also had the same interests and focus in mind as to what is best for Ujjivan. If I could borrow at a lesser rate from the banks, then I should be able to pass on that benefit or a part of that benefit to my customers. 15% of borrowal rates became 10%. We also did something very spectacular, which was unheard of at that time, was that ESOP to be given not only to a management team or at the top level, every person who has performed well. However small you are, as you grow, as long as the corporate governance standards are met, your regulatory and compliances are absolutely great. Your foray into IT systems and digitization is at its best. And one has that integrity as far as your data is concerned, and an innovative spirit to do your best. I think all of this was a magical mix, and that is how Ujjivan grew to be one of the finest institutions as an NBFC in the MFI space.
We thought it will be the biggest and the best run MFI company in the world. I still remember when, a few days before we were investing, Samit called me and said, I want to ensure that you're on board. The company will take 3-4 years to IPO and I don't want you to push me. Exactly 6 months after we invested, Samit and the rest of the management team essentially were coming and pushing, saying we want to do an IPO earlier, as soon as possible. Exactly opposite conversation was happening at the board 6 months later, which is where board was telling them that you guys are pushing a little too hard on the timelines and be a little more realistic. And kudos to them, they did it.
My first assignment came through in the form of getting ready for an IPO, and that's the first IPO I have done in my career also. We successfully managed to raise a pre-IPO round of 290 crores plus. And then, of course, the IPO came through in the month of May. I would say May 10th, 2016, the red letter day for Ujjivan and a very special day for me.
If I was to say a sense of pride, yeah, when we rang the bell for both Ujjivan Financial Services listing and the Ujjivan Small Finance Bank listing. 2015 to 2021 was an extremely sort of exciting journey. I think this sort of business requires a lot of empathy, in addition to being financially savvy. Shamit had all of that, and of course some of the leadership team that he built around him had all of that. This had to be also a financially successful business for it to be a repeatable and therefore a growing business. He got it right. He, I guess, understands financial services businesses like nobody else.
Out of the microfinance institutions that were active, Ujjivan had made its impact and reputation because of Shamit's own pedigree. Now, transformation of the microfinance institution into the bank and protecting the ethos of the company, this required complex financial engineering. So there was some convergence with the skills that I had to offer.
Abhijit, who joined the board, and me and Sunil, we worked on another project which is to get Ujjivan ready to transform into a bank. And to my biggest surprise, Ramurthy and others actually proposed my name to chair the transformation committee.
That journey is always difficult, and it's always a question of whether it is worth it to take all that on. For me, the answer is a resounding yes.
We had given a date of 1st February 2017 as the launch of the bank. And I said, come what may, we are going to ensure that. We did all the procedural, structural implementations. 31st January 2017, I think we stayed overnight because the auditors and us, because we had to transition that day and close the books of accounts of 31st January midnight and then transfer the entire balance into the bank.
We were amongst the first to do this, so we were somewhat pioneers.
And to that extent, it's not something I was doing on a regular basis. I was not transforming banks or transforming institutions. I was a regular banker. So it was to me also a challenge when I took this on. And I took it on because I knew I could do it, but I had not done it before. So when you do something like that, it's an achievement.
To get the license, I think is a really testimony to their integrity and solidity of how they went about doing what they did.
We had incredible success. Our IPOs were sort of record, in terms of how many times it was oversubscribed, So that broke that myth that these people are only short-term oriented.
We had come to visit and we were waiting at the reception. He was wearing that black colored Bengali dhoti and with, if I remember, a red kurta or something like that. So then he said, okay, guys, I'm sorry, I have a clash. I have got to go for this branch meeting. He spent with us 5 minutes at the reception. But then I realized that these are his work clothes, this is work demeanor, and he actually means that he has to go out to the branch, and that to him is more important than meeting us. Really impressive. Really impressive. In my mind, I have not seen a more interesting investment. Consistency is important. What happens at the ground level has to be consistent. And it has to be consistent with what the management is saying. When such a high turnover environment, if everybody is speaking the same language, it's amazing.
It's like a moving car, right? Suddenly you want to change the wheels of the car. The car has to continue moving because you're doing business. You can't stop and say, okay, I'm going to take a 6-month thing and do all this. You have to continue because those customers you have, their loans are continuing to be there, etc. So it's changing the wheels, changing part of the engine and all that on the go.
It's not just about making profits, which of course is one of the key things, but it's of course serving the community and all the customers as well as its employees. And I think Ujjivan is a fine example of how to wow both customers as well as employees. So I think being a good leader with a clear cause, what he wants to accomplish, is something that struck a strong note with me. And I'm proud to be associated not just with Ujjivan, but with Shomit itself.
I would say the accomplishment was to get the good directors on the board.
At some point of time, investors also look to the entities in which they invested because they are also competing for good investment. If they find that Ujjivan is a good investment from all parameters, the financial sustainability of the institutions and the governance standards were all set up well, then they were able to exit.
This journey would not have been possible if a lot of people who came onto our board and became board members, some of them whom we didn't know, as we went along, we became friends and became partners in the journey, So they played a significant role at different stages of Ujjivan.
I remember there is a great temple in Madurai. When it was built, it took actually nearly 100 years to build the temple because they faced a lot of challenges. But the only vision it had while it was getting built was it has to last 1,000 years. So I believe every institution which is built with the fundamentals so strong will last very long. And I wish Ujjivan to last for at least another 100 years.
The clients whom it had served as microfinance clients at the bottom of the pyramid, they are already beginning to come out of the poverty line, become small MSMEs. So therefore, I think there is prosperity at the bottom of the pyramid, and I think Ujjivan will continue to subserve its core values and nurture those customers through their financial journey.
When I left law, I said if I'm part of 1 or 2 scaling journeys which make a difference on the ground from a very, very personal standpoint, then somewhat life's mission gets accomplished, because if you reach a few million people, then what more can you ask for?
As long as you're focused on your customers and your people, and perhaps in that order, I think there's nothing that can stop them. And nothing has stopped them, nothing can.
The strength that the company has must stay. That culture cannot go away. If that culture goes away, the company may live in a financial sense, but the soul will be dead.
The Small Finance Bank is now on a trajectory that is new and exciting and different, but would not have existed without the ignition of those fantastic people that set it on its growth.
So the world's eyes are on us. And if we ever were looking for a time where we would have all the resources available, it is now. It's like in the movie, Apna Time Aa Gaya.
The Ujjivan journey sort of really proves the possible, proves that it's possible to be a mature, robust, rigorous professional organization and to lead with care and compassion and commitment to the least among us.
We always came in as a holding company. We never thought we'll get to a point where we'll be a bank, and now we are becoming reverse merging into a bank. Something that you back in essence is while still there, but in kind of a physical form, it wouldn't exist. So it's a mixed feeling, frankly.
It's sentimental because that's what I invested in. So that was my baby, investing into Ujjivan Financial Services. I think it's like the thappa which will go away in a way. Yeah.
For me, it is not about the holding company and tomorrow it is only the bank which is going to exist. It is actually the spirit of Ujjivan which matters.
They've graduated from high school and gone to college, and they are still in their youth. They have miles to go before they sleep, miles to go before they sleep.
There's certainly not a death, there's a rebirth. Just the opposite. I think it should be a celebration of a reborn Ujjivan.
Companies get merged, demerged all the time. It's just a technicality. But to take a pause, think about how far we have come, and the team that did it together, the old board members, the current board members, and nobody does it this way, in such a human way, I would say.
It is coming to an end. To a certain extent, it is sad. It is a celebration, it is a bit like the Irish wake. That's the reason why we chose Varanasi, where we would finally say goodbye to Ujjivan. It's like Elon Musk is trying to go to Mars, right? And he keeps testing with these rockets. Each of them have multiple rockets. So I think today Ujjivan has a lot of these rockets in terms of new businesses and all that which is there, which is ready to fire. As far as I'm concerned, hopefully end of this year, I'd be ready to go back to do some other stuff,